Hello, good people. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of Make America Think Again with Shauna Vaughn. Welcome, welcome, welcome to everyone. Thank you all for subscribing. Thank you for liking the videos. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for bringing family and friends to the page. Thank you for your comments. I truly appreciate you. Um, I don't always agree with your comments, but I do read them all. So I really appreciate it. Let's see, I have so much to talk about today, but let's start with the Reiner case. Um, okay, so in case for those who might have missed it, Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were brutally murdered in in the city of Bel Air, which is basically LA, this past week. Rob Reiner, huge film producer, director, started off as an actor. His wife, I believe she started off as a photographer. They met on the set of When Harry Met Sally, which is one of the films that Rob Reiner has under his belt. And then she also went on to produce as well. So well known and very much loved couple in Hollywood. Um, and apparently, I guess he hasn't been convicted, so I guess I'm just going to use the word allegedly, although everything points to the son. Allegedly, the son, Nick Reiner, is responsible for both of their murders. And here's what I know so far. So, Nick Reiner apparently has had a lot of trouble since he was a very young age. One conversation with a yoga instructor that I watched, and I believe she said Nick Reiner was about like 8 years old at this time when she would come to the house to teach the mother. Yoga or do yoga sessions with the mom. And she talked about how he was just so active and had so much energy and I would often interrupt the sessions and different things like that. So we know at a very early age, and he even talked about, I want to move into that conversation in just a second. He even talked about how he was the emotional kid, how he has struggled with his uh, drug challenges and he really didn't allude to or speak to the mental health piece of it. But I will say this, the one interview that I watched several, but one interview I watched where it was Nick Reiner and his father talking about the film being Charlie. This film that they did together is loosely based on Nick's life. And so they were doing an interview about the film. And one thing that I quickly noticed, just because I have a background in psychology, was his Nick's kind of aloofness and not being like totally engaged in the conversation at times. And the one key moment that made me think schizophrenia was as Rob Reiner is talking, Nick, you kind of see him like gaze like above uh, Rob Reiner's head. And then he has like this, just a slight little smile for a moment. It's kind of like he's smiling at something or someone that's not there. And then he kind of comes back to, you know, the conversation, re-engages in the conversation. And I was like, oh, I wonder if he has schizophrenia. And so that was just that moment. And then there were other times in that conversation, that interview, where you can just see like he's looking down, he's looking around, he's just not fully engaged in the conversation. Now, I will say this journalist or this person that was interviewing them, he was directing a lot of the conversation to the dad, Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner's huge in Hollywood, already well established, etc. It wasn't a very balanced conversation interview, but there were just too many times where I felt like Nick was not like fully mentally engaged in what was going on in that moment for him. So that was my first clue. And then also he Nick, he made a point to say in there was another interview that he did with the dad, and he said that, he was talking about himself, and he said, yeah, it was difficult at times to quiet all the noise in my head. And then he went straight into, well, when I say the noise, I mean like being a part of this family, and and maybe he's found difficulty with that, carrying that name, and people having this expectations of this name. But I just thought his choice of wording, I found that interesting as well. So, and then he did this YouTube thing. I don't know if this was supposed to be like a sizzle reel for acting, or he was just trying to start a show. I don't know, but he was doing this and he was playing this character. And he seemed to be healthy. He looked physically healthy in this video. Here, what I've seen recently, since the arrest, and I think they were on the red carpet maybe back in October. Um, yeah, he didn't look very healthy. And he also still was that aloof, kind of looking a different direction than the rest of the family when they were taking pictures. No, this very flat affect. You can't even tell emotionally what's going on, which is also a characteristic of schizophrenia as well. So let's get to the what I know about what transpired. So they went to a Christmas party. Well, first of all, let me back up. So Nick is currently living, or was currently living, in the family's home, or on the family's estate. I'll say that, in their pool house or guest house, etc. So he was currently living there. The parents, Rob and Michelle, were concerned about his mental state. I don't know if they were quite concerned about him using drugs again, or if he's relapsed or what have you. But they were concerned enough to not want him to be at home by himself. So they asked Conan O'Brien if he could come to this Christmas party with them. He goes to the party with them, and then Nick is just being strange. He's asking folks strange questions. He's staring at people oddly, making people feel very uncomfortable. And then Nick and Rob Reiner kind of have, I've heard several different stories. Some people have said it was this huge confrontation. Other people have said it wasn't that, they had a conversation. Then the Reiners left early. They don't know how Nick got home, or whether Nick left with them or not. We don't know if it was a big blow up, or just a, pull to the side and have a conversation. But what I do know is, for a 30-something-year-old man to have one of his parents pull him aside and have this conversation in front of all these people, it might have been something that was embarrassing to him, no matter how he was behaving um, in that moment, or at that party. So that happened, and then we know that the time frames are kind of wonky. So they left the party. You have this yoga instructor that shows up around like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's when their bodies are found. The yoga instructor can't get in. She or he contacts the daughter, who lives directly across the street. The daughter comes over, sees the dad, sees the dad deceased, runs back out of the home. Her roommate goes in, and then they contact, I believe Billy Crystal is really good friends with Rob Reiner, contact the good family friend, and then that's how the police are called. And then the roommate goes in, I guess, confirms, what's transpired, or what the daughter witnessed. And the police are called, and then the police are actually the ones who find the mom deceased as well. The daughter did not see the mother. There have been conflicting stories as to whether or not they were in the bed, like, so were they still asleep, like this had happened in the middle of the night, and so that they weren't able to defend themselves, or were they, like, I don't know, in chairs watching television. There have been conflicting stories on that. There have been conflicting stories on, first we heard their throats were slit, And then we heard multiple stab wounds has been, that's the information that's been come out from the police department. So it could be both, it could be to the throat and then other stab wounds. We also have information that Nick Reiner checked into a hotel in Santa Monica at like 4 a.m. that morning. Um, and then he was arrested in Exposition Park, which is right around USC. There, he's on video at a convenience store, goes in and buys a Gatorade, and then he's quickly arrested right there on the street next to or close in close proximity to USC. So that's all we have right now. He did have his first court appearance. He's been on suicide watch. He did have his first court appearance. It was very brief. We could not see him on camera. The judge refused, said the media could not take any pictures or have any video in court. And so there are just some still drawings. And he was in what they call a suicide vest when he made this court appearance. And then I believe the next court date is January 9th. That's what we know so far. But here's what else I want to share with you. When you have a person who is suffering from schizophrenia, because I know a lot of people are just not really aware of the different types. There's different types of schizophrenia. So there are going to be different signs, symptoms, and characteristics of schizophrenia. You could also have a person who is a genetic carrier for schizophrenia and never exhibit any signs, symptoms, or characteristics of the disorder unless there is like some severe trauma or induced by drugs. Drug use is, drugs are introduced to the brain and then that triggers something. So we don't know. What we did receive, and this information came from TMZ, I think just yesterday, that he was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Here recently, apparently, he was at a live-in facility somewhere in Los Angeles that costs about like 70 grand a month. And he was diagnosed there. Now, whether he left on his own or he had completed, the 30-day, 60-day, whatever it was, and this period of time that he was staying with the parents was to be for them to watch out to make sure he didn't relapse or whatever. We don't have that information yet, but we do know that he had a recent stay in a rehab, and that's where he was diagnosed with schizophrenia as well. He could have been diagnosed prior to that, and we just don't have those records at this moment. That information hasn't been released. But I will say this, that he himself, in one of the interviews that I watched, he did say that he had been in and out of 18 different rehab facilities. And in this interview, this same interview, Rob Reiner is saying that, I always took the position of if they have a degree and they sit behind a desk, that I should go with what they were saying. And, he said that he felt like in the past they handled Nick's issues from a very punitive standpoint. And he was encouraging parents not to do that and to listen to the child more. But any doctor with a, worth a grain of salt would tell you if a person suffers from addiction, that's probably not the person you want to listen to. They don't know what's best for themselves. They are suffering from addiction. So if you were just dealing with the mental health piece, that would be a different story. So yeah, it's a very tragic and very sad and heartbreaking case because the child, he might not even still be aware, or maybe, now he is with them giving him the medication that he needs. Oh, that's another thing. When he was in this facility, apparently the cocktail of medications they were giving him was exacerbating the schizophrenia, the characteristics of schizophrenia, which can happen with any psychological disorder. You got to get those medications just right. And if you don't, and it's making the disorder worse, and then on top of that, you add some drugs, you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen. So he could have been not only taking the drugs at the same time, and it could have been the schizophrenia, and he's hearing this voice and say, take the parents out. We don't know. We don't have enough information right now. But what I will say is I'm going to continue to follow this case as more information comes out. And it's just heartbreaking and sad and shocking that this even had happened to, I don't know, on the face of it, which seems like this great couple and loving couple, and they definitely supported a lot of different causes. They supported the Democratic Party quite a bit. Rob Reiner was very outspoken in regards to the felon in this current administration. He heavily donated to a lot of Democratic candidates, so there's that too. But yeah, very sad case, and I'll keep you updated.